Nero, Rome, 68 CE. Nero was Rome's most infamous emperor, remembered for cruelty, extravagance, and the persecution of Christians after the Great Fire of Rome. But his end was as dramatic as his reign. In 68 CE, the Senate declared him a public enemy. His guards and advisors abandoned him. Desperate, Nero fled the city disguised, hiding in a villa outside Rome. As soldiers closed in, he realized capture meant public humiliation and a slow death. Too afraid to act, he begged his servant Epaphroditus to help. Together, they drove a dagger into his throat. His last words were chillingly vain. "What an artist dies in me." With that, the man who set Rome aflame ended his life in disgrace. Caligula, Rome, 41 CE. Caligula ruled Rome for only 4 years, but in that time his name became a byword for madness and cruelty. He executed senators on whims, humiliated noble families, and demanded worship as a living god. Even his own Praetorian Guard grew to hate him. In January 41 CE, as he walked through a theater corridor after a festival, the guards struck. Blades flashed, stabbing him again and again. Some say over 30 wounds cut into his body before he collapsed. The emperor who declared himself divine, untouchable, and immortal was left bleeding on a marble floor betrayed by his protectors. Commodus, Rome, 192 CE. Commodus, son of Marcus Aurelius, believed he was the reincarnation of Hercules. He fought as a gladiator, dressed in lion skins, and even planned to rename Rome Colonia Commodiana after himself. But his erratic behavior and cruelty bred conspiracies. On New Year's Eve, 192 CE, his mistress poisoned his wine. The emperor vomited, survived, and staggered to his bath. There, a wrestler named Narcissus was waiting. He wrapped his arms around Commodus's neck and strangled him underwater. The emperor who dreamed of eternal glory died not in battle or ceremony but naked in a bathhouse, suffocated by his own champion. Attila the Hun, 453 CE. Attila was feared across Europe, called the Scourge of God, his armies burning cities from Constantinople to Gaul, yet his death came in the quiet of his wedding chamber. In 453 CE, after marrying a young bride named Ildico, Attila feasted and drank deep into the night. But as he slept, a nosebleed began. Blood poured down his throat, filling his lungs. Too drunk to wake, he drowned in his own blood. His men found him lifeless, the terror of Europe undone not by an enemy's sword, but by his own body on his wedding night. Pyrrhus of Epirus, 272 BCE. Pyrrhus, the Greek king of Epirus, was one of the greatest generals of antiquity. So skilled that his costly victories against Rome gave us the phrase Pyrrhic victory. But his end came not from an army, but from an accident in the streets. In 272 BCE, while fighting in Argos, Pyrrhus was in the thick of battle when an old woman watching from a rooftop hurled a roof tile down at him. The heavy ceramic struck his head, knocking him from his horse. Dazed, he was finished off by an enemy soldier. One of the most brilliant commanders of his age, who matched wits with Rome itself, was brought down by a peasant woman and a simple roof tile. Alexander the Great, 323 BCE, Babylon. Alexander the Great conquered much of the known world by the age of 32, building an empire from Greece to India. But his death remains one of history's great mysteries. In 323 BCE, after a drinking feast in Babylon, Alexander fell violently ill. Over the next 12 days, his condition worsened: fever, paralysis, and loss of speech. Some claimed he was poisoned by rivals. Others believe it was malaria, typhoid, or an autoimmune disease. What made his death truly strange was what followed. His body reportedly did not decay for several days, leading many to believe he was divine. The man who could not be defeated on the battlefield was instead struck down by an invisible enemy, leaving his empire to collapse into chaos. Ivan the Terrible, 1584, Russia. Ivan IV of Russia, better known as Ivan the Terrible, ruled with terror for nearly 4 decades. He tortured nobles, massacred towns, and even killed his own son in a fit of rage. But his death was strangely quiet. In March 1584, while playing a game of chess, Ivan suddenly collapsed. Witnesses claimed he had been unusually restless that day, muttering prayers and demanding holy relics. Some believe he was poisoned by boyars who feared his tyranny. Others suggest a stroke or heart failure brought on by stress and age. For a man whose reign was marked by screams and blood, his final moment came with a toppled chessboard and silence. Sigurd the Mighty, 892 CE, Viking Earl of Orkney. Sigurd the Mighty was a feared Viking warlord who conquered northern Scotland, but his end was almost comical. After defeating a Scottish noble named Mile Brigte in battle, Sigurd decapitated him and tied the head to his horse's saddle as a trophy. As he rode home in triumph, the severed head swung loose. Its teeth scraped against Sigurd's leg, cutting into the skin. The wound became infected, and within days the great Viking was dead. The warrior who had crushed armies and carved out kingdoms was killed by the corpse of his enemy. One final ironic act of revenge. Emperor Valerian, 260 CE, Rome. Valerian was the only Roman emperor ever captured alive by a foreign enemy. In 260 CE, during a disastrous campaign against the Persians, he was taken prisoner by King Shapur I. What followed was humiliation beyond measure. Ancient sources claim Valerian was forced to kneel as Shapur mounted him like a human footstool. After years of captivity, Valerian died. Accounts say he was flayed alive, and his skin stuffed with straw to be displayed in a Persian temple as a warning to Rome. The most powerful man in the empire ended his life as a trophy, remembered not for his reign, but for his humiliation. Humayun, 1556, Mughal Empire. Humayun, the second emperor of the Mughal dynasty in India, rebuilt his empire after years of struggle. Yet his death was absurdly mundane. In 1556, while descending the stairs of his library in Delhi, he tripped and fell. The emperor had been carrying an armful of books when his foot caught on his robes. Striking his head, he died from the injury days later. A ruler who spent decades reclaiming his throne and leading armies was undone not by sword or battle, but by a simple misstep on a staircase. His tragic fall became one of history's strangest royal deaths. 1953 Soviet Union. Joseph Stalin ruled the Soviet Union with an iron fist, responsible for purges, famines, and the gulags that killed millions. Yet his death was strangely undignified. On the night of March 1, 1953, Stalin suffered a massive stroke in his residence. He lay on the floor for hours, soaked in urine, while guards and officials, terrified of acting without orders, did nothing. By the time doctors were summoned, it was too late. Stalin lingered for several days, partially paralyzed, before dying on March 5th. The dictator who demanded absolute control was powerless in his final moments, abandoned by the very system he created. Adolf Hitler, 1945 Germany. Adolf Hitler, dictator of Nazi Germany, unleashed World War II and orchestrated the Holocaust. But as Allied forces closed in on Berlin in April 1945, his empire crumbled. Trapped in his underground bunker, Hitler refused to be captured alive. On April 30th, after saying farewell to his staff and marrying Eva Braun, he retreated to his private room. There he bit into a cyanide capsule and pulled the trigger of his pistol. His body was hastily burned in the bunker courtyard as Soviet troops advanced. For the man who sought to conquer the world, his final moments were spent hiding underground, consumed by fear and defeat.